My name is Emame, and I'll be handling our session today on student rights. So the purpose of this session is to educate students on the rights available to them and the means of enforcing these rights. Our session today will cover students in the higher institution, that's undergraduate. And I hope that at the end of this session, you would have gotten some information, you would have learned something new, and you would know how to enforce your rights. So let's get right into it. What are student rights? So it is necessary to point out at this point that there are no rights exactly termed as student rights, because whatever rights that are available to you as a student are rights which emanate or flow from the rights available in the Constitution and those you enjoy by being a student and by being in a contract of education with your school. As we proceed in our session, I would explain what a contract of education is. So, these rights generally include our basic human rights contained in the 1999 Constitution. In the course of this session, you will hear me make reference to the Nigerian Constitution a lot. This is because, like I said earlier, our student rights flow from those contained in the Constitution. We have some rights like the right to life, the right to dignity of human person, freedom from torture and discrimination of any kind, rights to privacy, freedom of movement, and freedom of association. So now, some rights specific to students include the right to attend classes and take examinations, the right to demand for your examination script and request a remark of your script when the grades given do not reflect the high effort put in by the student. So you have instances where, as a student, you write exams, and when the results come out, you feel like you hear some people saying, "This is not my result," or "That is not my result." And for such a student, all hope is not lost. You have the right to approach the lecturer and demand to see your script, and also ask for a remark if you feel that a remark is necessary. We also have freedom from harassment of any kind, both sexual and otherwise. Right to fair hearing when facing disciplinary action. And so, as a student, if you are involved in anything, if you've been involved in anything, whether intentionally or unintentionally, and you are to appear before a panel, like students that may be engaged in examination malpractice, meaning they are guilty and they are to appear before the panel, such persons cannot be condemned without first being heard. The principle of fair hearing is provided for in the 1999 Constitution, so it also applies to students. So you can't be condemned or you can't be punished by any disciplinary panel without first exercising your right to fair hearing. It is a right and you can demand for it. Now, what is the relationship between student rights and human rights? There's no way you can talk about student rights without talking about human rights, because, like I said earlier, they are interrelated. So whatever you can enforce as a Nigerian, whatever you can enforce as a Nigerian, whatever you can enforce through the Constitution, you can also enforce as a student, so long as it is provided for. Now, I keep making reference to the 1999 Constitution. Let me also mention that most universities have their constitution or the laws that bind them or the laws they operate by, and you may also have your student handbook. And then for the student union government, they also have their own constitution and different laws they operate with. So they are interrelated, like I said earlier. So whatever rights are recognized by the constitution of your school or by your school handbook, you can enforce them. Now, the contract of education. What is the contract of education? In very simple terms, every student is in a contract of education with his or her school, meaning the university. This contract is recognized by law and enforceable. In the case of students in the university, this contract is created when the student, upon fulfilling all the admission requirements, is offered admission by the university and is given a letter of admission. So once you are given admission by a university and you're able to fulfill all the requirements, I know that you do registration, payment of school fees, payment of acceptance fees for schools that demand for that. Once all this is done and you have accepted your admission by fulfilling all these requirements, an enforceable contract of education is created, and by virtue of this, you as a student of that university now has the right to enjoy the above outlined rights and other basic human rights. As I concluded here, I said, therefore, so long as you can enforce your human rights, you can also enforce your rights as a bona fide student. So it is one thing to gain admission in a university. It is another thing to fulfill the requirements. So once you gain admission, you need to meet up with the requirements, and so that it can enable you enjoy this right as a student. Ways of enforcement of student rights. This part is a really important part of our session today. So it is one thing to know your rights. It is another thing to know how to enforce these rights. The means of enforcement of the rights of students depend on the particular rights the students seek to enforce, but essentially universities have their internal means of solving problems. For every university, I may not know what is obtainable in your university, but I believe that every university has their internal means of solving any problem or any issue, and of course, any report of an infringement or of an unfair or unjust treatment meted upon any student. The first thing there is resort to the Nigerian Constitution and the handbook and guidelines of your school where applicable and available. So before you can say that your right has been infringed, that right actually has to be provided for. You can't enforce what is not there. So when you say my rights have been infringed, you need to be able to point, to a particular law or a particular rule that provides for this right. Then you can claim that this right has been infringed, and you have that backing. You have that backing, that legal backing or structure. Report the matter to the appropriate bodies and also inform the student union government. Every school, every university has their student representatives who have been elected, in most cases elected by the students to represent them and push their interests. And so where a student is facing any problem or issue or feels like he or she needs protection, you can approach your representatives, your student union government, approach them, talk to them, and it is their duty, to take up the matter, take it to the appropriate body and make sure and ensure that you get relief. These persons are elected to serve the students. So you can approach your president, the vice president, the secretary, or the director of welfare. So they'll take up the matter, and by virtue of their being officials of the student union government, they already have this relationship with the school management, and they already have this right, to approach whoever, be it a lecturer or a fellow student, to, represent you and ensure that you are protected. So in a case where maybe you need to send out a publication or a letter or anything, they can use their letterhead, to make it more official. So what you cannot do for yourself as an individual, you can get it done through the student union government. If it borders on sexual harassment or any other harassment involving a lecturer or any other staff of the university, report the matter to the appropriate body. We know what was trending a while ago, sex for grades, cold room, and all that. Sexual harassment. We'll be telling lies if we say that this doesn't happen. It happens a lot. Students are being harassed. I don't want to say female students, right? Because there are situations where you also have male students being harassed. It happens. It's very rare, yeah, but it happens. So if as a student you're being harassed by a lecturer or a fellow student, report the matter to the appropriate body. For instance, in the University of Calabar, I know that there is the Anti-Corruption and Transparency Unit, which is a body of the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Offences Commission, the ICPC, that handles staff-related misconduct. You can make a formal complaint to this body. So I don't know what may be obtainable in your university, but I'm very sure there will be a body in charge of handling, sexual harassment related issues. And if you also feel maybe you are not the victim, but you know that a classmate of yours or someone else is facing harassment, you can report, you can place a report on the person's behalf. And I'm sure that these bodies, have a clause or something that can ensure that you remain anonymous. Because the issue of sexual harassment is not one to be treated lightly. And persons who are victims of this act may not want to report, maybe out of shame or out of fear. So, but I believe that if you're able to approach the right body, if you're able to approach the right person, they will take it up and ensure that you get relief. If the harassment, molestation, or victimization is from a fellow student or is cult related, a complaint could be made at the university security unit. I must also point out at this stage that sometimes as students, you may be going through an issue and you jump stages, you don't take it up the way you should. Now, if you're facing harassment or victimization from a fellow student or from cult group in the university, you can first, since it's an internal issue, the first step you should take is to approach the security unit of the university. They are saddled with the responsibility of ensuring that students are protected and are safe. And when you approach them, probably with the details of the student, and like I said, anonymity is very important. So if you want to remain anonymous, maybe so you're not in fear of retribution or being attacked later, I'm sure they can keep you anonymous. It is better to try to seek relief than to stay silent. It is your right. So you shouldn't have to go to school and you're being intimidated by a fellow student or by a lecturer or by anybody. It is your right to make a report to ensure that you're protected. But then, if you reside outside the university, or you feel that the response you're getting from the security unit is not convincing enough, you can go ahead to make a complaint at a police station, and I'm sure the matter will be taken up from there. We also have approach student law firms. For every university that has a faculty of law, I'm sure they have student law firms. These are students engaged in student practice. They are engaged in student practice and they are lawyers in training. So if you need to prepare letters, I know that when issues come up and maybe you have to write an official letter, maybe to your HOD or to these bodies I've mentioned before, you may find it difficult, to do the drafting, especially as it concerns interpreting provisions of the Constitution. So this is where student law firms come in. So you can go to them, tell them what the problem is, and they can help you. They can even direct your attention to laws you did not know even existed, because they are more knowledgeable on the laws and how they can be applied, how they can be interpreted, and all that. So they can also help you prepare letters, other processes, follow up the process, and help the student get relief. It is instrumental to point out also that you have the student high court, right? You have the student high court and all that. So when there are issues between students or student bodies, they are mostly handled by these student high courts, where their judges are lawyers to handle student related issues. And sometimes these things are settled before they even get to the school management. So if you're facing a problem, do well to approach student law firms. And then we have other external mechanisms like the police, human rights agencies, and lawyers. When you have exhausted all internal mechanisms and you haven't gotten the relief, the appropriate relief, or you feel like they are not doing as much as they are meant to do, you can approach external bodies such as involving the police, human rights agencies, and lawyers.
So right now we have why you should know your rights as a student. It is very important for you to know your rights as a student, because we have many persons suffering from ignorance because you don't even know these things. When they are infringed or when you're treated unfairly, unjustly, you're not even aware because you did not even know that you even have this right in the first place. So you should know your right as a student in order to protect yourself and enforce your rights when infringed, and also to guard against infringement, intimidation, harassment, or victimization of any kind. You need to know these things so that you're not treated anyhow, treated with levity, either by a fellow student or by a lecturer or even by the school management. Because if you know these things, you'll be able to stand your ground, and it's like taking what is yours, because these rights are yours. You're able to protect yourself, and you will not be intimidated. And we are quickly coming to an end of our session, and what we have here is the way forward. The university should take steps to ensure that both the lecturers and students are aware of this right and ensure that they are protected and enforced. Also, a conducive environment for learning should be provided where both parties feel protected and comfortable. Most universities on admission of first year students have what they call orientation. In this orientation, you're taught the do's and don'ts. You're given maybe the university handbook and guidelines, what to expect, what is also expected of you. What should be added is maybe a session on rights, knowing your right, the rights available to you as a student, and what you should do when these rights are infringed on. And not just for the students, the lecturers should also be educated and taught to treat students with respect and dignity, because sometimes lecturers, of course, having the upper hand, have this tendency to treat students without regard and feel like they are mini gods or something. But the university should ensure that a conducive environment is provided for students to come to school to learn, feel protected, and feel comfortable. So we have come to the end of our session today. Thank you very much for listening in. Thank you for giving me your time and your attention. I hope you have learned a thing or two from my session today. Like I mentioned earlier, everything I have said or I have put down in my presentation is not exhaustive. There are other rights, there are other means of enforcement, and I'm sure that you would know and learn them as you go on. But I am sure I have been able to give you a background on your right and how to enforce them. And I hope that from today you would know that you have the right to be protected as a student. Thank you very much.